My name is Clayton, and welcome to another episode of the Watch Dog Podcast. I'm a professional dog runner and watch enthusiast talking to his pals about dogs and watches. How is everyone doing? Thank you so much for listening. You know I appreciate it. So sorry for the late episode this week, everybody. Lots going on. But hey, better late than never. If you live in the United States, I certainly hope you had a fun and safe 4th of July. I like that it was on a Friday this year. Take us into a long weekend. We had a pretty low-key day. Tried to get my dogs out hiking early because one of my beagles in particular is absolutely petrified of the fireworks. So the whole evening is just spent snuggling her and consoling her because she is shivering, the poor little thing. But hopefully now that the 4th of July has passed, so too has fireworks season. Other than that, it was just a pretty chill day. Did some grilling. A lot of branches have fallen in my yard from windy, stormy days, so had a fire going in the fire pit most of the day. Got rid of some of that. And it was just great. So however you spent the day, I hope it was with the people you love. Also, just wanted to thank everybody for the great response to my episode last week about my new watch, the Nomos Club Sport Neomatic World Timer Dune. Heard from a lot of you who had some additional positives and negatives, and there were a few positives and negatives I forgot to mention last week as well. So before we get to the main topic today, just wanted to touch on those really quickly. Somebody reached out and said, they were ready to buy this watch. They loved the complication that you can quickly scroll through 24 time zones and the hour hand moves at the press of the button. However, they didn't buy it because it lacked a date. I'm fine without it having a date for a couple reasons. I've been wearing it for 2 weeks now, just about. And the thinness, it's just incredible. That's a real bragging point for Nomos, I think. So obviously having a date complication would bulk it up a little bit. I think Nomos intentionally left it out. So they could brag that their world time watch is under 10 millimeters thick. So that's one reason. Another reason, so I said I have the Vogard Time Zoner. Similar type of watch to the Nomos, right? There's a dongle on the side of the Vogard. You lift that and then you can move the bezel. When you move the bezel to a different time zone, the hour hand moves with it. Obviously, if you're moving around a bunch of time zones, depending on what time of day it is, say it's 8 o'clock in the New York City Eastern time zone. You start going to cities in Europe, different time zones, you're going into the future, you're going into tomorrow. And then when you come back to your own time zone, you're back in today. The date gets a little confused. On the Vogard, there is a method to recalibrate the date. That's actually how I broke the watch. I broke it, recalibrating the date, and now the hour hand is misaligned. So I have no problem, again, with there being a lack of date on the Nomos. It's just one less thing to break. Another positive that I left off last week that I forgot to mention was when you unscrew the crown on the Nomos, there is a little red ring that reminds you, hey, if you're going in the water, if you're going in the rain, just screw the crown back in. I think more watches should have that. I often forget. I'll put it back on and take a picture and like, oh yeah, screw the crown back in, dummy. So I'm in a Slack group, and there was a guy who owns the exact same watch, the World Timer Dune, and he did a write-up about his positives and negatives, and he mentioned the bracelet. Last week I mentioned I didn't love the way it looked with the polished center links. He didn't have a problem with those so much as he did with the sizing. It's pin and collar. And many people agreed with him that at a certain price point, a watch should have screw pins instead of pin and collar. This watch is almost $5,000 USD. Typically, we associate pin and collar with inexpensive Seikos, right? Not $5,000 watches. You're getting into luxury territory there. But really, I don't mind. Screw pins can be a little stressful. I'm always afraid I'm going to strip them. I've had many a screw pin back out on me while I'm wearing the watch. That could be disaster. The screw pin falls out and your watch falls on the ground, hits a rock, it's destroyed. So while pin and collar might be a pain in the ass initially, ultimately, it's just set and forget. And I actually find it challenging in a fun way to do pin and collar, and I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it now. So it does not bother me, but I understand why it would bother some people. So I actually did put the bracelet on the watch. I know last week I said I wasn't going to, but curiosity did get the best of me. So Topper did size it for me. However, I still needed to take a half link out And also, they took all the links out from the same side. So the clasp was way off to one side. I like the clasp to be in the middle. I'm pretty OCD about that. So I did the surgery and I put the watch back on the bracelet. You know, the bracelet fit me great. I found a good fit. There's a 1mm to 2mm of micro adjust. So it's pretty easy to get a good fit. Plus, there's also 2 half links. I have a major gripe with the bracelet, though. Again, it's a quick release bracelet, which is cool. Most quick release bracelets only have 1 tab, right? This has 2 tabs. I bite my fingernails. It's a nasty habit. Maybe this will get me to stop, but my fingernails are not long enough or strong enough to press in at the same time. I do have a pair of those Bergeron tweezers, like spring bar removal tweezer type things, and I did use those. But still, I'm always afraid I'm going to slip and scratch the watch. I don't mind scratching a watch while I'm wearing it and doing stuff, bumping it, but it really bothers me when I scratch a watch when I'm, sizing the bracelet or taking a bracelet off of a watch or putting it on. I don't like those scratches because it's just a reminder of how clumsy I am. Some people may find it easier. I think manufacturers think they're doing you a favor when they do 2, but I don't know. I'll take 1 every single time. And yeah, I think that's about it. I'm really enjoying this watch. I'm buying a lot of straps for it. I haven't had a watch that's a strap monster in a long time, so I'm having fun buying some inexpensive 2-piece nylon straps for it. Bought an orange one, which is really fun, really funkifies and summerifies this watch. And I also bought the OEM 2-piece nylon from Nomos, so that will be here in a little bit, I hope. They also sell keychains for the 6 limited edition watches, corresponding colorways. So, of course, I bought the Dune keychain from Nomos. Man, that's how they get you. We're suckers, aren't we? Oh, man. They know we are weak and will buy all this crap. But anyway, yes, let's move on from the Nomos. It's about damn time. Let's get to the main topic of today's episode. So a few weeks ago, I went out to lunch with my friend John. He is not a watch enthusiast. I have a watch friend, John, and a non-watch friend, John. This was non-watch John. Okay. Anyway, he knows I'm into watches, so he always likes to see what I'm wearing. I was wearing the Groen, the affordable dress watch option from the Groenfeld brothers, who make high horology, very expensive watches. I'm going to do an episode about that next week. I promise. I know I've been teasing it. And anyway, he said, "Oh, that's a very handsome watch, beautiful watch." And I said, "Oh, thank you." I noticed he was wearing a Wenger dive watch, Wenger. I gave that watch to him many years ago, I think like 6 years ago now. We used to run together. That's how we became friends. He has a bad knee, bad back, so he swims. Now, swimming is very low impact on the body. He wears that watch every single day. When he swims, he wears it all the time, never takes it off, he said. He's gone through a few battery changes. It's never had any water intrusion. It's just been a solid watch for him. It's a quartz. The bezel has fallen off of it now. It looks a little worse for wear, but he doesn't care. That makes him a normie, right? Quote unquote normie. He wears that watch despite the bezel falling off. He doesn't care. That's his watch. And I love that. I long to be that, but no, I'm into this hobby way too deep. But anyway, he did say he was in the market for a field watch. I used to have a Weiss field watch that he loved, but he's way too practical to spend that type of money. But he said, "Have you ever heard of the brand Weyer?" I said, "Yes, I have. I'm surprised you have." He's like, "Yeah, I get their advertisements. I think it's a really handsome watch. I'm thinking about getting one." And I said, "Well, if you want a field watch, you should really look into Hamilton. I mean, that's sort of the beginning and end when it comes to field watches." And he said, "You know what? I have looked at Hamilton. I think I like the Weyer." I said, "All right, hey, get the Weyer." And then a couple weeks after that, I went to pick up a dog I take to my off-leash group. Sometimes I pick him up from his doggy daycare if his mom is at work or busy. And he came out, brought Cosmo the dog out to me, and I noticed he was wearing a watch. It was a field watch. I couldn't exactly tell what it was. And I said, "Oh, hey, that's a nice watch. I'm a watch geek." And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's a Weyer." I said, "Oh, God, another Weyer." The second normal person I've heard mention Weyer in the last couple weeks. And he said, "Yeah, I saw the ads for it and I took a chance and bought it. And I like it so much, I bought one for every member of my family." And he said, "I'm not a watch guy. I'm not a watch guy at all, but I love it. I thought, okay, this is pretty interesting. I'm having some run-ins with normal people when it comes to watches, and the idea for an episode started to form. And then the other day, one of my clients was wearing a Breitling Navitimer. I asked him about it. It was a gift from his dad, and he said his wife got him a Frank Mueller on their wedding day. I thought, okay, all right, more normie run-ins. Was at a coffee shop last week, saw a Luminox. Okay, so I want to do an episode comparing normies, regular people who are wearing watches, versus us watch enthusiasts who are in way deep. Despite what we think, and I don't have any like hard data on this, but I know it's a very small percentage of all watch purchases are made by enthusiasts. We are the minority by a lot. Most watch purchases are made by normal people who just want one good watch. So with that in mind, I thought I would take a look at the major differences between normies and enthusiasts. Are we all that different? Let's find out. Well, I guess I should do a disclaimer before we start here. This is all in good fun, and these are differences and similarities that I have noticed. You may have completely different experiences, and if you do, reach out. Don't be afraid to send me a message on Instagram. The link to my Instagram is in the show notes. Every single week, I seem to hear from somebody different, and I absolutely love it. So keep them coming. And also, this gets released as a YouTube video. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. Comment on this episode. What have you noticed with normies out in the wild? Maybe when you approach somebody about their watch. Do they look at you sideways? Do they engage? Let me know what has happened with your experience with normies out in the wild. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is practicality versus enthusiasm. And there's two parts to this. First is price. My friend John, my non-watch friend John, absolutely adores the Weiss Field watches. Every time I wore mine, he would take it off of my wrist, try it on, take pictures of it. I know he went on the Weiss website extensively, but he just could not justify the price, even though he really, really wants it. And he does well. He could afford the ultimate field watch, the Rolex Explorer, if he really wanted to. But it just makes no sense to him to spend that kind of money on a watch. Even though I know he would wear it all the time. He would do everything in it. He would sleep in it, shower in it, swim with it. Like I said, with that Wenger, he has done everything in that watch. I know if he got a Weiss, or gosh, even something more expensive than a Weiss, he would wear it and justify the purchase 100 times over, but he just cannot get there. So a few $100 Veyer, he's much more comfortable, and he still hasn't bought that yet, which leads me to believe he can't justify that even. I think that Wenger was $39, $40 at TJ Maxx. My wife bought it for me when I was first getting into watches. He can justify that, right? But yeah, there's a certain level of practicality that John has, and we don't have that, right? Enthusiasts don't have that. A couple $1,000s on a watch, we're desensitized. That's a bargain. That's a steal. I need that. I can justify that, no problem. I can sell a few watches and make that happen. I can justify that. Well, at least I didn't buy an Omega or a Rolex or a Cartier. Watch enthusiasts just think a completely different way than a normal person who's looking for one good solid watch. I mean, think about it with other things. I have a good friend who is a knife collector, Dirk. He's had some health struggles here recently, and I know he's been talking about it a little bit on social media. Seems to be doing much better, so we're thinking of you, Dirk. He's a knife collector. He has dropped big money on knives. I think some approaching luxury watch prices, exceeding some luxury watch prices. I am not a knife enthusiast. I have a $50 knife that I carry occasionally. I often forget to. That's how much of a priority is for me. That's fine. I'm okay with a $50 knife. I'm actually so practical, I'd rather carry a Leatherman because that has like 30 tools on it. I need pliers, wire cutters, a bottle opener, scissors. It's all in one. I'm very practical when it comes to stuff like that. So I get it. I would never spend more than $75 on a knife. That's just not where my priorities lie. Dirk, on the other hand, has spent many, many times that on one single knife. So it's all about where enthusiasm lies for us. And with John, he is enthusiastic about watches and about the Weiss, but he just will never, I'm convinced anyway, never, ever, ever buy one. The second part of practicality versus enthusiasm, I think, is quartz versus automatic. My wife has a lot of watches. I talked about it. We're doing Watch Soup again, by the way, and I'm getting distracted here. ADD. Bobby Legs and I are doing Watch Soup Wednesday nights on the Bobby Legs YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that as well. We've done 2 weeks in a row. I'm thinking this will be the third week in a row, so excited about that. But anyway, squirrel. Anyway, I was talking about my wife on the last episode and how she has a lot of watches. Most of them are quartz Timex. She loves Timex watches. She does not really understand the concept of automatic or mechanical watches. Every time she wears one of her few automatics, she has a few mechanicals and a couple automatics. She makes me set them. She has no interest in winding a watch, setting it. She's not sure how many times she's supposed to wind it. She's afraid she'll break a hand wind watch by overwinding it. So, yeah, it's not practical for her. She would much rather have a quartz watch that, sure, she has to take it in every few years to get the battery changed, or I can do it for her. That's no big deal to her. Much more practical than having an automatic watch. And for us watch geeks, we're pretty much the polar opposite of that, right? We would much rather wind a watch ourselves, have that bond with our watch. We talk about automatic and hand wind watches having a soul compared to quartz watches, right? We are romanticizing the whole process of setting our watch. And, normies are not like that at all. Right. I can think of another aspect where I'm a normie compared to somebody who might be an enthusiast. Let's take cars, for instance. I have no time whatsoever for a stick shift. I don't understand why anyone would want to do it. I hate doing it. If my life depended on it, I can drive a manual shift. No problem. I hate it, though. I hate driving stick shift. Absolutely loathe it. I grew up in a very snowy, hilly area in Michigan, and it was a nightmare. Every time I had to do it, which wasn't very often, my uncle had a snow removal business and I worked for him, and I would drive his truck, little Ford Ranger. It was a stick shift, and I probably shortened the life of his transmission by a few years driving that thing. I frickin' hated it. However, car enthusiasts love stick shift. I have a friend, Brian. Every car he buys has to be stick shift. That's just what he prefers. I want to, kind of like pin and collar, set it and forget it. Put it in drive and go. I have no interest in bonding with my car while I'm driving, pressing the clutch and shifting. That sucks as far as I'm concerned. But cars are very functional for me. They get me from point A to point B, and I don't really want to engage with them beyond that. And a lot of people are like that with their watches. My wife, she has several watches. She has way more watches than I do. It's not stressful for her. I think she has some watches that she hasn't worn since I've known her. 15 years. I've never seen her wear some of these. You think she stresses about that? You think she looks in the watch box and like, oh, I should sell this. I haven't worn it in 15 years. Hell no, she doesn't. She's not insane. So I'm like that about certain things too. And cars just happen to be the one thing that, I do not want to drive a stick shift ever again if I can help it. But some people, that's all they want to drive. So there's a lot of similarity there. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was brand. To the casual watch wearer, sometimes brand is everything, right? Think about before you were a watch enthusiast, how many watch brands did you know? If you were to ask me 5 watch brands 10 years ago, what would I have said? Let me see. I would have said Timex. I would have said Rolex. I think I would have said Casio. I'd like to think that. I would have said Tag. And I had negative connotations with Tag. In high school, the logo reminded me of Tommy Hilfiger, and I did not like that. So I always thought negatively of Tag. And then 5, what would I have said? I don't even know if I knew a 5th one. So yeah, brand recognition is huge. Rolex has spent millions of dollars and decade after decade after decade of marketing to make the public aware of their brand. My grandmother, who grew up in a very small town in Michigan, knew what a Rolex was, right? That was always the goal. I always thought it was a retirement watch. I had a great uncle, George, and he would come to family reunions. He was a real tan guy. And he had I think it may have been fake. Knowing what we know about my Uncle George now, it was possibly fake. But anyway, I just remember him wearing a gold Rolex he got when he retired. My dad always said that anyway. Who knows if it was true? But that's what I always associated Rolex with. If you asked me to describe Rolex 10 years ago, I would have said gold watch you get when you retire. But still, it was synonymous with wealth and with an achievement, right? So I guess if I was successful and never discovered watches, never found this hobby, maybe I'd still think of Rolex that way. And maybe after my 50th birthday or some milestone, I would want a Rolex, right? Who knows? So I think when non-watch people go for a watch, one nice watch, Rolex is often the choice. There's a few other brands. I have seen that a lot of non-watch people make Breitling that one expensive watch they buy. I know a few people who have one nice watch and it's a Breitling. I know another very wealthy person who has one watch. I only see him wearing one watch. He may have more, but he wears it every day, a Tag Link. That bracelet looks dated. I'm not sure how old the watch is. I think he's had it for a while. He wears that all the time. I had another client who wore a Rolex Submariner Kermit, the original, the aluminum bezel. He wore that for everything. He showed it to me once, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but not in a long time. He wore that watch doing everything, and I noticed it one day, and he took it off and showed it to me. And listen, I love scratches on a watch. I think they add character. This thing even had me oh boy, this might need some help here. I think the springs were coming through. The bezel didn't turn. I mean, he's like, yeah, I've done bricklaying in this. I've done this. I've done that in this watch. And finally, he did get it fixed eventually. But even me, who likes to put a good scratch or two on a watch, I was a little bit okay, pal, this is a little too far. Yeah, so I think there can be some snobbiness too when it comes to people and they want that one nice watch. They would never go for another brand that they've never heard of. Even, Moser. The Moser I had does not look like a very expensive watch, but it was. It doesn't look like that though. I think if somebody wants one expensive watch, they're not going for a Moser. Moser is something you kind of have to discover once you're in this thing for a while, right? I would tell people it's a Moser. And then I remember I was at a party and I was talking to this guy and he said, "Oh, that's a very nice watch." And I said, "Oh, thank you." I took it off and he was like, "Wow, this is impressive." Then he Googled, I was talking to someone else then, he Googled Moser and he's like, "Oh, wow." I just said, "Yeah." And I was embarrassed at that point. I was like, "Yeah," I kind of looked down. But yeah, that's if somebody wants one nice watch for their 50th birthday, they're probably not going for a Moser. It would be really cool if they did, but I don't think they're going for a Moser. And I think you have enthusiasts that are a bit snobby sometimes. And maybe it's not even snobby. Maybe it's just knowing what you want. Some collectors think Rolex is the end-all be-all. And other collectors think Rolex is entry-level luxury. Just remember, your nicest watch is somebody else's beater, right? Even if your nicest watch is a Rolex Datejust or a Rolex Submariner, there's some really wealthy guy with Richard Mille and God knows what, MB&Fs, and he puts his sub on when he does gardening and mows the lawn. Just always remember, put that in perspective sometimes. But yeah, and I think we can get fixated on brand a lot of times. But I think real enthusiasts, can have everything in their collection from Rolex to Casio to Timex. I mean, I do. I have a little digital Timex I wear for work, the Atlantis 100. And then I'll get home and I'll put on my Rolex Air King or a Breitling. It doesn't matter. A cool watch is a cool watch. And I think that's why so many of us who have expensive watches still buy affordable watches. I feel like I've never quite gone past it. I have a purpose for them. I do like to wear affordable digital watches for work. I don't mind beating them up, and they're functional for me. I can time things on them, and that's important in my job day to day. I don't know. It seems like even the most seasoned collectors, even maybe the most well-to-do collectors I know, still have a weakness for a good G-Shock or Seiko Diver or Citizen here and there. And I think that's awesome. I think we can probably think of a million things where brand is important and where we'll stick with a brand. Like some people are just Rolex guys or Omega guys. I know many collectors who are Seiko guys. That's all they want. They just buy really cool Seikos. We get that way with cars. Oh, my Camry lasted me 10 years. I'm just going to buy another Toyota, another Camry. My Honda. I've had that thing since college. Then when the time comes to buy a new car, you buy a Honda. We have these association with brands, and it's based on just positive experiences. They're a well-built product that we have some sort of bond with. And I know that happens with watch brands. I am not quite that guy because I'm not a collector like some people are. Like, I don't need every iteration of the Speedmaster. I think it's really cool that people are Speedmaster collectors. Like, I think that's awesome, and I'm a little jealous. I wish I had that collector gene, which is a great podcast, by the way. The Collector's Gene. I think that's what it's called. Try to put a link to it in the show notes. He talks to collectors, not only watch collectors, collectors of many things, art, but does have a lot of watch collectors on. I don't have that collector's gene, and that prevents me from, I've said it before, I wanted to collect every Seiko 7A28 quartz chronograph I could find. It was the first quartz chronograph movement ever. And they were built to last. They were built to be serviced. They weren't disposable. And there's so many freaking cool watches that movement comes in. And I tried to go down the rabbit hole, and I just couldn't. I just don't have it in me. It would just be more stressful. Then I'd have 30 watches that all look the same. Primarily the same. There's a lot of differences, but you know what I mean. So yeah, all this to say, brand can play a part with both normies and watch enthusiasts. Third, size. Just think of all the people you see on the streets wearing watches. Maybe you don't notice this, but I certainly do. They're all big. You don't see many people wearing small watches. Many of these people, the watch is way too big for their wrists, right? I see a lot of people wearing Invicta. Invicta is probably the one of the brands I see the most out in the wild, right? See a lot of Invicta out there. They're huge, and people are rocking those things with pride. I remember when I got into watches, I bought my Shinola Lake Superior Monster. That was my first, nice watch. That was the watch that got me going in this hobby, and I still wear it for work. I tried on another Shinola. It was a chronograph. My wife liked that one more. She just thought it was a nicer looking watch, but it was small. And I remember thinking, if I'm going to spend, I spent like, I don't know, that Shinola ended up being over $1,000. Because I just wanted like one nice watch, and I'm from Michigan, and I knew my cousins who live near Detroit loved Shinola, so that was the brand I thought of when I went to buy a new watch. And I just remember thinking, like, this chronograph seems real small. Like, if I'm going to buy this one watch and spend this much money on a watch, because at the time, I had a lot of money saved, but I'd never spent that much money on a watch before. It seemed kind of crazy. It was very scary. Like, took my breath away a little bit. So I want it to be big. The size should justify. Then I can look down and say, okay, money well spent. It has some presence. If I bought like a 38 millimeter watch that was that expensive, I don't know, I'd feel like I didn't get my money's worth or something. And I see it all the time. And my wife likes bigger watches too. And I think if she were to spend money, real money on a watch, she wants it to be bigger. She does not want the pink, diamond encrusted, flowery watches. That's just not her thing. She has a 41 millimeter Soyosa. She loves it. She wanted the 41 millimeter Rolex OP. She doesn't want a 36. She wants the 41. She doesn't care if it wears a little big on her. I didn't think about that for a while until I had the 42 millimeter Hamilton Murph. I even had the Tesseract box. It was a limited edition boxes from that movie Interstellar. I didn't think about size, and I posted it on Facebook, and I'll never forget. Somebody said, dude, that watch is way too big for you. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, the lugs overhang. And I was like, oh, they do. Look at that. Huh? They do. And, I typically don't give a shit about what people say about my watches or about me. I'm going to do what I want. I double wrist a Garmin and a regular watch all the time. People comment on that all the time. And I don't care. It works for me. So I can look like a dweeb. I'm almost 50. Who gives a shit? But you know what? I agreed with the guy who pointed it out on Facebook. And ever since then, I'm like, you know what? I don't like when lugs overhang. I personally don't like the way it looks. I can wear a larger diameter watch as long as the lugs are not overhanging on my wrist. That's where I kind of like, I personally don't love that. So, for instance, the SNR, it's a big watch, 45 millimeters, doesn't overhang. The FXD from Tudor had 52 lug to lug, but didn't overhang just by the way they were shaped. But, some watches do, like IWCs. I don't love the way they wear, even if it's a diameter that's reasonable, 40 millimeter. The lug to lug's a little long, Longines. Lug to lug, a little long. So it took somebody pointing it out for me to say, you know what? I agree with you. Other people have pointed out things they don't like about my watch, and I don't care. I disagree with them. But the size thing, definitely for sure. So I think most normal people who buy watches, and again, this is just my observation, you might completely disagree. I think size helps them justify the price. Yeah, I totally believe that. I think they want something that's chunky, that's big, that shows the world, hey, I spent some money on this, and maybe proves it to themselves. Like, yeah, this was worth the money because it has some presence and people are going to notice it. Where, on the other hand, enthusiasts are very conscious of size. Most enthusiasts want smaller watches. They'll always take a 38 over a 40 or a 42 or a 36 even. We're just aware of that. And I'm not sure why that is. I guess maybe we're just more conscious of how these things wear. And I think maybe it's picture taking, right? Would you care so much about lug to lug and how a watch looks on your wrist if you weren't posting on Instagram all day or Discords or Slack groups and where people can comment on Facebook where there's keyboard warriors who will crap on your watch the second you post a picture of it? Would you really care that much? I think I would because I don't like the look of an overhanging lug on my watch. I just don't. But, like a tuna, for instance, has no lugs, basically. It's huge. It looks huge on me, but I don't mind the way it wears because it does not overhang. So if somebody says that's too big on me, I'll say, thanks. I don't care. Thanks for noticing. I wear a huge Garmin that does overhang on my wrist, completely different. I don't even consider the Garmin a watch. It's a health tool. It's gigantic. I do not care how that looks. But with a regular wristwatch, I am a little conscious of it. All right, number 4. I think normies need a reason to wear a watch. Like I said, my wife has tons of watches. She doesn't always wear them. She can go weeks without wearing a watch. She wears her Apple Watch. And she'll go like several weeks without even wearing one of her Timex or Citizens. You think she stresses about that at all? No, she doesn't. Because she's just not going to wear a watch around the house like you or I might. I don't have a reason to wear a watch. I want to wear a watch. That is my reason. I always want to wear a watch. I feel naked without it on the left wrist. So I always do. My brother-in-law was here a few weeks ago, as I mentioned a couple episodes back. And he happened to see my watch box. And he was like, oh, Clayton get rid of his Rolex? And I was out. I can't remember where I was, walking the dogs, I think. And Marissa was like, no, he's probably wearing it. And he's like, well, he's not going anywhere fancy. Why on earth would he be wearing his Rolex? And that's how people think. My brother-in-law actually does have an Oaken Oscar, but again, he never wears it because he's like, I don't go anywhere. I work from home. Why would I wear it? Just like, because it's awesome. Why do you need a reason to wear it? I've heard collectors say this as well. I've heard, certain people say, I don't go anywhere. Why on earth do I even wear? Why would I wear a watch? I don't know. Because you're an enthusiast and watches are cool. I don't know. We cosplay. So even if I'm just lazing around watching TV, I like to have my watch on. So yeah, I think normies need a reason. We don't need a reason. And just, spending a lot of money on these things and how much we have invested is sometimes reason enough. And the fifth thing is a little odd, but it's something I've noticed and a little foreshadowing from earlier when I talked about it. Non-watch people do not like screw down crowns. I remember I sold my friend a Squale dive watch that I had. And I saw her every week, and she would proudly rock that watch. She loved it, but she had trouble setting it because of the screw down crown. And there were so many times where I would see her wearing it and the crown was open. And she's like, oh, yeah, I forget. It's hard for me to do. Admittedly, that crown is difficult to operate. But yeah, she would say, oh, yeah, darn, I went swimming. I showered. I did the dishes. I was like, oh, man. My wife has a couple screw down crown watches. She also hates it. She has me do it. She does not like screwing them in. People don't realize you have to push it in and then screw. And, I'm sure a lot of watchmakers get crowns with threading issues because people just don't know how to do it properly. That seems to be a big deal. I forget. I mean, I obviously, once I'm wearing it, I notice, oh, yeah, forgot, and then I do it. But I think that's a real issue. And I've seen that on some other places where, non-watch enthusiasts are talking about like, man, it's so hard to screw down the crown. There was on a Facebook page, I think it was a Seiko group. There was a guy who had bought his first automatic watch, and he's like, I wore it in the shower and now it's all fogged up. Why could that be? And you could clearly see the crown was unscrewed. And he didn't even know you could do that. I'm sure he bought it and it was screwed down. So he unscrewed it at least to set the time. And then he just couldn't figure out how to screw it back in, or didn't realize you had to screw it back in. Found out the hard way that, yep, you have to screw it down or else water can't get in. Now, it's not the be-all, end-all. Sometimes you can leave it unscrewed. There are gaskets and things. But yes, make sure you screw down your crown, everybody. So, yeah, I hope that made sense. That was just some of the differences I've seen and similarities between enthusiasts and normies. A lot of fun. My brother-in-law, again, he was in Aruba after he was here, and he texted me a picture. He's like, have you ever heard of Oris? I was like, yeah. He called and he said he's at a jewelry store, and the Oris Datwat 2 version of the Aquas, the diver, really caught his eye. He's like, what do you think of Oris? I was like, oh, I was just at an Oris event last week. He's like, oh, no way. So he ended up buying it. Like I said, he does need a reason to wear a watch. He's not just going to wear his Aquas lying around the house. Now, he might, the honeymoon period, but 2 years from now, he's probably not going to. He needs a special occasion, which is fine. But it was pretty cool. He just saw it, wanted to mark the trip to Aruba, so he bought an Aquas. Yet another normie story about a watch. So I feel like, I don't know, maybe people around me are, my infectious enthusiasm about watches is finally paying off and it's contagious and people are excited. Or I don't know, maybe I just find myself in the presence of watch people. I don't know how it works. But anyway, I'm babbling on, so I'm going to leave you now. But anyway, hope this made sense. Yeah, reach out. What have your normie out in the wild watch experience has been lately? Have you seen watches? Have you talked to anybody? Have you stopped them? Did they totally brush you off? Did they call the police? Or did they engage with you about their watch? Let me know. Shoot me a message on Instagram or comment on the YouTube version of the podcast. Sorry it was late. Again, we'll try and get back on track Monday. I've just been really busy, so I apologize. But hey, you got another episode 4 weeks in a row. We're on a roll. Watch Soup, Wednesday nights, Bobby Legs. I'll catch you on the next episode. Remember, sometimes you're the dog, sometimes you're the hydrant, but at least you're outside. See you later. Take care. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Watch Dog Podcast. Bye now.